Guys, you're not going to be able to see too much. Hopefully you'll be able to see enough.
You're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
Don't be a smartass.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right, you're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with it.
Oh, I love that clip, man.
Hello there. I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm a clinical psychologist, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, an author, a podcaster, public speaker, and today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists. My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Okay, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. That's not true. From an Islamic perspective, you're not a kafir unless you know what you're rejecting. You have to know what Islam is and what you're rejecting to be a kafir. Otherwise, you're not a kafir. Like, let's say someone came to you and they gave you a messed up version of Islam. You know, we're Muslims, we believe in this crazy thing. And they say, I don't want to believe in that crazy thing. They're not necessarily a kafir. So this claim, maybe Christians believe it. Jordan Peterson doesn't seem to be a Christian, but I don't think it really adds up. Jordan Peter Swine, no comment.
Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary.
This is so funny. This is the best guy to respond to this claim.
Going on long retreats deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics, like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So
And
there's
so-
always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out. But
Then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
Okay, if Jordan Peterson thinks that it's something other than that, then he can elaborate on what atheists are rejecting that they don't know that they're rejecting. Or he can stop being ambiguous and annoying and just say, this is the definition of God, and atheists don't usually define God like this. But he can't, because whatever he says, atheists will say, yeah, I know that about the Christian God, and I don't accept it.
well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheist claim that there's no God is a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but my experience with atheists is twofold, is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left them with an animus.
But I think that
That is true. That is true. That just doesn't exactly correlate to the point he made initially, which is they don't know what they're rejecting. I think the better claim would be atheists reject God not based on logical reasons, or they don't reject God for logical or rational reasons. There's always something irrational. But I mean, for Christianity, it's different because they have a bunch of irrational beliefs, if we're being fair.
you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes, or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like three people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of, they want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start.
That was a fair point. If we're being honest, that was a fair point. And yes, shout out to Sunny Soundbites. Thank you, everybody. Like the video. And comment, spam comments. If you guys think of anything that's halal, comment it. Because I think the more you comment, the more YouTube pushes the stream out to other people, and the more people watch, and the more fun we have, inshallah.
With your claim, how do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like what?
Notice how he responded with the question, which isn't always bad, but he tends to do that a lot in this discussion. Let's keep going.
What is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory. How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all-powerful, all-perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with the Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
Well,
like
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God
Mm-hmm.
is, no one could speak to each other. The mere fact of communication
That was facts. That was facts.
presumes a commonality of assumption and definition. And it's certainly not the case that I regard any archetypal manifestation whatsoever
Mm-hmm.
as equally religious. So that's not a real claim. Let me give you an example. For example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God. Okay, and that's one of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories.
yes.
Now Moses is a faithful
That it's crazy they put that in the Bible, because we all know the hadith of, I think it's a hadith and not in the Quran, of Musa alayhi salam when he asked to see Allah, and Allah revealed himself to a mountain, and the mountain like disintegrated or like evaporated, like destroyed. It got destroyed or something. And Musa alayhi salam collapsed. He just passed out. So Moses didn't see God. So it's funny that the rabbis or whoever changed the Bible. They're like, no, Moses did see God, actually. It's very arrogant.
servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible interpretation.
It's the case within the confines of the story, obviously.
Well, not obviously. When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book, and that everybody has everybody has disagreed historically on, it seems like, even the most benign detail about a book this big. It seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant? Because the alternative claim is that he's good.
I'm saying that we can't know, because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you. So you have
Well, actually, the problem is that there's multiple competing claims. If the Bible claims many different things, the Bible is something that's contradictory and it's incoherent in and of itself. Therefore, it can't be discussed with in any concrete manner.
We have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could.
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say the.
Why does he get so mad? It's a common and fair misunderstanding. Why are you getting so angry?
I said
That is possible, yes.
Okay. So despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and difficult life and can withstand a lot of difficulty and travail, God puts him between two cliffs so he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back.
Excuse me? Excuse me? You think God put Moses between two mountains so he could just see a sliver, and then God showed his traps or something? He showed his upper back? Like, what is this, bro? What is this? Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Like seriously, dude?
Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable. It's a pinnacle experience, and that people in their finitude have to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality. Well, that's not the God that's defined in that manner, right? It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming. And that isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story.
So the God that Jordan Peterson is thinking of is the God that showed his back to Moses. Otherwise, what's the point of mentioning that? What on earth did he mention that for? In light of this claim that atheists don't know what they're rejecting, that God showed his back to Moses. Okay, yeah, I think we're going to convert a lot of people from atheism to Christianity when they learn that God showed his back to Moses. I don't understand him.
I mean, it's the same claim, for example, that you're a finite creature and that you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable, and that you have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God? The question becomes, what do we mean by God? And in the Bible, it's not even clear if the biblical authors know what God is, because Yahweh has historically emerged from an early storm god, a deity that doesn't exhaust the category of deity, and that has changed over the Old Testament. Does God have physicality? Does God not have physicality? It seems like, yes, if you define religion to mean anybody that has an aim, anybody that looks at the unknown, anybody who wants to go from chaos to order is inherently religious, then yes. But also in the same way, I could define atheist as somebody who doesn't dogmatically believe in a religion, or somebody who doesn't regularly attend religious services or belong to a denomination. To help especially the audience kind of like boil this down, there was a lot of words there. That the central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
A central claim.
A central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
No,
Is that-
I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Yeah, then in that case, then we're all religious, but then I can do the same thing and define one particular element of atheism. It seems like we both have a reductive view of what the other side looks like, to the point where a conversation seems incoherent, and not just incoherent, but not in the way that the average Christian understands Christianity to be.
I don't think atheists, I don't think most of the atheists around here would reduce the Christian view of God. They all probably grew up in a Christian household. So I think they understand generally, basically, what the Christian God is. And before anyone says that, well, if they understand it basically, then they don't fully understand it. Jordan Peterson just said you don't need to fully understand God, right? So, yeah. Rami, are you that guy who worked with the two other guys who were on Jubilee twice? No, that was Jad. That was Jad. That was not me. I interviewed Jad on the Three Muslims afterwards, but I was not there. Yeah, some people say we look alike, which is a compliment to me, mashallah, to the brother.
Do you have a
Okay,
problem
let's
with...
pause there. Sorry, you've been voted out.
Awesome.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to
How
meet you.
doing? Nice to meet you, too.
David.
David, good to see you.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono, L-O-N-O.
I don't know anything about the Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting.
I'm not rejecting it.
Do
No
you
more
be-
than I'm
do
rejecting
you believe in
anything that
Lono?
I don't know anything
Do you
about.
believe in Lono?
This would be a good argument. This is a good argument. This is a good argument. Because if Jordan Peterson doesn't believe in the God Lono, then he's rejecting it based on based on a lack of information. Okay. And now JP's trying to say, well, did I say I don't believe in it? But you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, you believe in the one true God, and the one true God is not Lono. Therefore, you denounce false gods, as you're told to in the Bible, and therefore you denounce Lono. That's what this gentleman should have said afterwards. You reject any God that is not the God of the Bible as a Christian. And if you don't, then in almost every denomination of Christianity, you're not a Christian. Point blank, period. And I hope he says that next.
Because that's your presupposition that undergirds your argument, and unless you can prove that that's valid, then there's no point in...
My question is quite simple.
Yeah, but that doesn't
Do
mean
you
it's
believe-
formulated accurately.
Do you believe that Lono exists? Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Why? You have to. You can't just not, you can't plead the fifth. This is not court. You can't just, I plead the fifth, I'm not answering. You have to, especially as a Christian, by the way. Aren't you supposed to denounce false beliefs as a Christian? Maybe I'm projecting as a Muslim. I don't know. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to say, no, I don't believe in that mumbo jumbo.
For the reasons I just described. You already insisted that if I reject something, that if I'm ignorant of something, I reject it. Do you think that...
No, I don't know why he didn't just say it. It's an insinuation that as a Christian, you cannot believe in a God other than the true God of the Bible. Therefore, you don't believe in Lono or whoever else. Like, just say that. Why would he say it? I feel like he got stumped and then he's like got a bit stuck. So he went back to the question over and over. But just say it.
Everyone in the world has to know everything simultaneously for that to be valid and true?
That is a damn straw man. That's a damn. I'm hitting my keyboard and like breaking everything. But that is a straw man.
I think in order for your
Answer that
argument
question.
to be true, in order for it to be true that we atheists don't understand what we're rejecting, then you need to also apply that to yourself and to Christians and to Muslims and to any other person on this earth, where if you don't understand what you're rejecting the belief in, then you can't reject the belief in it. That's the implication of your
I didn't
claim.
say
That
that
is
I
true.
rejected the belief in Lono. I said
it's
I didn't
Lono.
know who Lono was. I didn't say anything about rejecting.
That's because I've asked you several times and you haven't, but let me get to my even greater point. You're saying atheists don't understand what...
Every time I say a word, this guy named Jay just goes, well, what do you mean by arguing? And it's killing me every time. The last time I referenced it, I was muted. So out of shame, I haven't mentioned it again.
religion is or what God is in order to be able to reject it fully or completely. We have someone over here who studied it in their own way. I've studied religion. I have a degree in religious studies, a specialty in Christianity and Mediterranean traditions. And further than that, beyond me, Pew Research studies suggest that atheists and agnostics actually know more about religion and about religious stories, the foundational principles, than believers.
That's interesting. And that probably comes from a critical point of view. I wouldn't say they know more necessarily. I mean, he quoted a study. I'm not talking about the study. Maybe the study says that. I'm just ignorant. But it would make sense that they know more of the critical positions.
That's because they're
On top of the basic positions, the normative positions. So that then the research makes sense.
more religious than they think they are.
Okay, you can.
They're concerned with deep matters, and one of the defining characteristics of someone who's oriented in a religious direction is that they're concerned with deep matters.
What? So now we're reducing religiosity to concerned with deep matters? I'm sure someone's concerned with the deep matter of the lore of SpongeBob. Does that mean they're religious? Like, what is he even saying at this point? He's trying to, I feel like he's trying to bewitch me. I feel like I'm being bewitched.
Okay,
In fact, it's virtually definitional.
right, but they also have to identify with a religious tradition and accept the foundational stories that go along
Well,
with
that would mean more that they're sectarian than that they're religious.
No, that would mean that they're religious, not that they're sectarian. Is adhering to a specific religion mean you're sectarian? This guy is so annoying.
Most people, for example, in the United States, deny that they're religious, but accept that they're
Let's
spiritual.
pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
He had 2 or 3 slam dunks there that he just didn't exactly slam dunk. There was one that he did, but he didn't. The alley-oop was there. LeBron was in the air. I didn't mean to rhyme, but I don't care.
Hi, nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Good, how
What's
are you?
your name?
I'm Greg, nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Greg.
Okay, so I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy, where we have multiple related meanings for a word, right? Like, for example, a famous painting can be emotionally moving in that it changes my emotional state. And when I was on the highway coming here to the studio, I was physically moving, I was changing my position. If I said, I believe the Mona Lisa is very moving, and you said, you don't really understand what you're saying, it's nailed to the wall, I would say that you're the one who doesn't understand what I'm saying, not the other way around. And the way that relates to this is there are many concepts of God, and I'll admit, I find a lot of what you say about that interesting. I'm familiar with it. The idea of this kind of Jungian hierarchical thing, or as a metaphor, or a symbol, or the kind of, atheist, materialist, literalist idea of a agentic, omnipotent, omniscient being that intervenes in reality, right? So when I'm saying that I reject the concept of God, I'm aware of these other definitions of God, but I think that when we use words, we tend to only imply one meaning at a time. So the same way that I would say the Mona Lisa is moving emotionally, but I would not say it's moving physically. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
What literal way?
the way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God.
See, I like this so far. He went on a little bit too long, to be fair. I don't think he needed the whole polysemy thing. I didn't think he needed to elaborate on that. He should have just said, I know what I'm rejecting, this is what I'm rejecting, this is what Christians believe, and I'm rejecting what Christians believe. End of story. This is a good point, and this is what needed to be said from the very beginning. And I hope that Jordan Peterson interacts with this normally, but I don't think he does.
God is
Do you
like,
think that there's an underlying unity of things?
could you
I was right. It took a whopping 3 seconds. I'm not wearing a watch. 3 seconds. What on earth? I don't even know what that means. When you ask an atheist that, when you ask a Muslim or a Christian, someone who believes in God, that question, well, underlying unity, everything obeys God. Everything comes from God. Okay. Everything goes back to, contingently back to one God, Allah. But when you ask an atheist, what do you mean by a underlying unity?
Explain that question.
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you, yes, no, or that
know
there are
that
multiple competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify or there are multiple competing truths.
The universe exists in a particular way, yes. And that one particular way does not step on his own toe, so to speak, to put it like simply. What does that have to do with what he said about God? And this is what Jordan Peterson does a lot. He asks a lot of like deep questions that aren't exactly related to the topic being discussed, so he can shift the goalpost from here to freaking North Africa, so far away, so we just forget that we exist. And we forget the last discussion. We think that we were born the second that question was asked, because everything just goes out the window at that point.
I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
I went back by accident. What he should have said is, wow, that's a very interesting question. I'll answer that as soon as you explain how the heck it's irrelevant to what I just said 5 seconds ago. Explain how it's relevant, and then maybe I'll answer.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
What do you mean by underlying? What do you mean by unity?
In a sense, yeah, you mean like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles?
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
What? What is, I don't even know what kind of fallacy this is. He's saying because this particular thing exists in this realm, that one particular thing could also exist in that realm. Okay, so what? How does that prove anything?
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
Thank you.
I'm trying
Thank you. Oh my, okay, what is he going to say?
to define God, the God
Yeah.
that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. Here's another question for you.
He didn't answer. Is he hitting like that old age, that old stage in life where you just can't really remain on topic? He just went back to the prompt. Well, I'm trying to define what I don't think atheists know about God, and so they don't know what they're rejecting. And let me ask you another question. No more questions. They should have a set amount of questions they're allowed to ask in a row or in the entire discussion.
What do you think guides you in your
And he's doing this on purpose. He's doing this on purpose. I believe he just came up with that question right then and there. That millisecond, he opened his mouth. I think he thought of that question just to get out of this discussion.
determination of whether or not what you're saying to me is true?
Can we go back? Can we stay on what you were talking about?
We are.
Okay.
You're just uncomfortable with the question.
No, I feel like you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not.
very
Okay.
true.
I asked
All
you a
right.
very specific question.
He needed to elaborate. You need to elaborate. You need to prove it. You need to shove it in his face with cold, hard evidence. Pull out the receipts. Pull out the receipts and tell him exactly how he's moving away from the main point, which is you said Christians don't know what they're rejecting. I told you exactly what I'm rejecting, and now you're asking me about how do we come to truth. I don't care about how we come to truth. I care about your claim. It's as simple as that. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Alhamdulillah for Islam. Alhamdulillah for Islam.
Question. What is it that you think guides you when you're talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Logic, memory, reasoning, sensory information.
The observable reality I thought would be the number one answer on the board, but we don't have Steve Harvey here to tell us.
How do you distinguish that from being governed by something that's false?
An interesting question.
How do you know the difference when you speak between what's true and what's false? So you could imagine
Infer, right? I can infer. I can.
from what principles?
Well, am I on planet Earth? Am I on planet Earth? This is an atheist. Their go-to is always the observable reality, science. We can test things. We can measure things. We can observe things to see if they're true. And then we have very specific logical principles like the law of non-contradiction or the law of causality. A lot of atheists don't believe in that for some God-forsaken reason, a'udhu billah. But Jubilee is a joke. I don't like Jubilee. I don't. And that's why I have to do this with the little half quarter screen, because I don't want to get copyright striked or stricken. I don't know which one it is.
So, and what are you getting at?
Oh, he's so good at stumping people for like on nothing. They're tripping on air.
I'm getting at the fact that your conscience guides you. Is that
Okay.
reasonable?
I'm literally like, I'm hitting the wrong buttons on my keyboard. That's how frustrated I am. Now he's bringing in conscious. Your conscious guides you. Wow. Cinema. Where's that meme? Where's that meme? Cinema. Absolute cinema.
Conscious is defined by
Conscience.
my empathy and my reason are my foundational.
Define it any way you want.
Okay.
So he doesn't even give a concrete definition of what consciousness is, or conscience, not consciousness. What conscience is.
Okay, so that's how I'm defining my conscience. Is my my kind of my
You don't need to define your conscience. You don't need to define your conscience. You don't need to. You don't need to. You're talking about God here.
conscience is my sense of
Right
and
and
wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
does that come from?
I would say that
What? I'm actually getting angry. I'm just going to play it and try not to lose my mind.
that comes from an evolved capacity to empathize and a recognition of the benefits of engaging with and nurturing that capacity. And then that empathy is constrained and guided by reason, right? Like, for example, I am driving down the highway, there's a kitten in the road. I'm going to empathetically feel, oh my God, I want to save the kitten, but then reasonably, like, I'm going to get hit by a car, right? So that's sort of the process through which I make ethical decisions.
Okay,
is
how do
empathy
you-
constrained by reason?
Do you think that people can differ in their response to something empathically?
Yeah, like,
Is there a mediating principle that can tell you one person who's empathic and another person who's empathic that disagree, who's correct?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Okay. We all know that atheists don't have objective morality. That's a fact. That's a given. I think we all know that at this point. Okay? And if you don't, then now you know. Atheists don't have objective morality. What on earth does that have to do with his prompt, which is atheists don't understand the God that they're rejecting? My boy is back. Yes, sir. I'm back. And it's been one hell of a week. I'll talk about it again later.
where we'd have to, talk it out, right? We do that in real life all the time when we have, whether that's a discussion with a friend about the right thing to do in a situation.
Are you aware that the title has been changed from 1 Christian verse 20 Atheists to Jordan Peterson verse 20 Atheists? Yes. I heard about that. And the reason why, we'll get to it later in the video. It has something to do with my friend Danny. And you guys are in for a surprise. Just watch.
Whether that's a policy discussion about law, right? That's where
I'm sorry, guys. I'm skipping. I can't do this anymore. I like this guy, Greg, but he's about to be voted out. And Jordan Peterson is just like, he's just running around ring around the freaking rosy.
polysemous
I didn't make
ideas
that
of
point.
God.
You did.
I did. Well, I
I made a
I
specific
characterized
point
it,
that God
right.
was associated with conscience.
I made the specific point that God was associated with conscience. You didn't prove that. All you did was say your conscience guides you. God is related to that. Now, I do believe that God is related to our conscience as a Muslim because we have the fitrah and Allah tells us about the fitrah. But we understand that God exists innately. And if people struggle with that, then we have arguments and logic to prove God exists. And even better, we have the Quran to prove that God exists because it has things in there that people 1400 years ago could not have known about. Things that we're still discovering like to this day with modern technology and modern science. It also has prophecies in the Quran, and there are prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That's how we know everything in Islam is true and that God gave us a fitrah and so on and so forth. Okay, talking to an atheist as a Christian, you can't just infer that, right? There's a logical gap there, and they're going to say that's God of the gaps, and you're making all theists look dumb. I know this is a Christian here, but he's making all people who believe in God look stupid, and it's not cinema. Not cinema at all.
I feel like you kind of retreat into this semantic fog.
I'm not retreating at all. I'm advancing, sir. You are retreating.
Oh, cold. JP is cold. What do you mean by retreat?
All right. Well, it was very nice to meet you. I
nice to
appreciate
meet
the
you too.
conversation.
Yeah. It's very brave of you to do this.
I love how it goes from so hostile to so kind. Like, I'm not retreating, you are. It was a pleasure meeting you, sir. Have a great day.
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
That is facts. That is true.
What is up, Mr. Canada?
How you doing, man?
Mr. Canada.
What's your name?
Brian, I think it's interesting that you say that morality and purpose can't be found in science. Actually,
No, within science.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Purpose, I actually grant you, because purpose is subjective, right? Unless you want to boil it down to the purpose of life is just to procreate, right? Sure, whatever.
It is actually, I think, easier to find. They're both impossible. But I think there's more of a case for purpose than there is for morality, because morality differs more than purpose in the way that people operate around it. The way people operate around purpose is in their lifestyle, the way they live. And usually the way they live is to prolong their life. That's usually fundamental. That's not objective by any stretch of the imagination. It's just common. And morality tends to differ a lot more. And that's the only reason why. So I don't know why he's dropping purpose from morality, but both are losing battle, to be honest.
Morality is actually something that we do see. We actually have examples of Neanderthals, and older individuals found in the tribe, missing an arm, missing teeth, still alive somehow in his 40s, 50s, right? Typically, you're a Neanderthal, you can't eat, you can't hunt, you die, right? But we know that members of his tribe were taking care of him, right? So we know that at some level, early in our evolutionary history, we actually developed altruism. We have examples of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness.
This is just speciation, and it's a mechanism that we use. It's like a logical fundamental thing for us. It's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an instinct in us, speciation, to have our species go on, because we would like our species to do the same for us. So if we all survive, including myself. So that's kind of the basic mentality of it. That has nothing to do with morality, maybe ethics, but it has nothing to do with objective morality. And maybe Peterson should have said, objective morality and purpose can't be found within science. That would have been a better prompt. Because morality, are we talking subjectively or objectively? That is the question here.
Right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets 3, right? He actually freaks out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots.
Except for the greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy chimps.
They want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
so morality is intrinsic.
I think.
So it precedes science.
I think that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right,
Yeah.
require some level of morality or.
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
Because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with regard.
His argument proves that the evolutionary paradigm is unfalsifiable. They subsume any apparent contradiction into their model. Altruism overall is conveyed to the model in many ways. Let me think for a minute, because those were a lot of words for me. I don't understand. I need you to elaborate, please. English, please.
Words to science. Thank you very much.
Is that?
Precisely the point that you just made, that science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
He supports a geno, can't say the rest, but a geno in Gaza, and he's trying to speak for morality. That is actually hilarious. That's a very good point.
Also not scientific.
Because it's not derived from the scientific process, as you just indicated.
It doesn't need to derive from the scientific process. It's the fact that
hang on a sec.
we are social animals and we need that to exist as a group.
I
right?
agree, but
Sure.
you pointed to the morality of Neanderthals, to the morality of chimpanzees. They didn't derive that from science.
They don't need to. That's not how
That's
that works.
my point.
Science explains it. So
No, science doesn't explain morality.
it doesn't explain.
Science doesn't derive anything. Science doesn't make anything. Science doesn't cause anything. Science is just the understanding of how things work and operate in the universe. So the same way Einstein found the force of gravity and how it operates in his understanding, or to the best of his ability, he's saying that science could be used to find morality within biological beings, social biological animals. So that, and it's crazy because on a base level, I agree with Jordan Peterson's position that science cannot objectively determine morality or purpose. But he's doing such a bad job of conveying this argument that now I'm not siding with the atheist, but the atheist is making more sense than him. And he's just doing terribly. He's doing terribly, and it's pissing me off. Rami, when it comes to morality, I think the key is always purpose. The issue is atheists don't believe in any ultimate purpose. To say why living, naturally surviving is good is a fallacy, 100%. And that is the problem with atheism. It inevitably leads to nihilism because you have no objective truth, no objective morality, no objective purpose, and everything is subjective to you, which a lot of atheists just get by ignoring the fact that nothing is objectively true and just living life as if there's objective truths and objective reality and just doing whatever they want in life based on their own subjective opinions. But yeah, JP is not doing a good job of conveying that. And I think it started with his bad prompt.
How social animals would need to be.
Well, that's
altruistic.
a complicated question.
But we see it though.
Yeah, but explaining the evolution of morality and explaining morality itself aren't the same thing.
Okay, so you're asking why does this happen?
Yes, that's more accurate.
Because we're social animals and we need to be.
Yeah, but there's more to it than that.
Is there?
Jordan Peterson is acting like he understands, he knows why. in a manner in which he can prove. He's acting like, why do these animals have morality? I know why. I can prove why. That's how he sounds. But in reality, he's just asking, why do they have morality? And this guy doesn't know why they have morality. He can only guess. And that's what Jordan Peterson's relying on. That I don't know, but I'm going to pretend I know. Because I know that you don't know, and I'm going to stump you with the question. If the gentleman here asked Jordan Peterson that question first, Jordan Peterson would be the one who's stumped.
Sure. For example, so we're moral animals that have a sense of the future.
Sure.
Okay, that makes us unique. And that structures our morality?
No, actually, there are other animals that can predict the future. Or
Not
predict
really.
the future. No, tigers. Actually, there was a tiger at the SF Zoo that killed somebody. And so
Hunting
actually,
animals.
No. Kids threw shit at the tiger. The tiger actually plotted its escape, and it found the
I'm not
kids.
saying that animals can't think.
Okay.
No, but
let's
they can
pause
perceive
here.
the future. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
This is like the third discussion where it just got insanely messy for no reason. Peterson just muddied. He's just got down in the dirt and he's like, come wrestle with me in the mud. Bros 2 a.m. here in Europe and I'm studying baby formulas for an exam in uni. I am cooked. You shouldn't have left it for last minute. Next time, don't leave it for last minute. And also, you shouldn't be watching my stream. If you have your baby formula exam, go study for the exam. Maybe drink some baby formula and it will help you understand it more. That was a joke. Don't do that. And always consult your medical professionals. That Brian guy does well against JP. I want to see how people react. Daniel reacted to skipped that part of the video in his reaction. LOL. Who's Daniel? Oh, Daniel Hakikachu. And who did you mention? Brian. Who's Brian? Let's see.
Thank you, man.
good man.
I think this guy was Greg. I don't think he's Brian.
Yeah.
Everybody spam go study in the comments for our friend here, SOS, who needs to study.
Hey, Jordan Peterson. How you
How
doing?
you doing, man?
My name's Luke. Nice to meet
Good
you.
to see you, Luke.
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science is a little shaky because
This is the second guy that got the prompt wrong. Both of them got up and said morality can be found in science. But the prompt was can't be found within science. Unless I misheard him. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm stupid.
How you doing,
my
man?
name's Luke. Nice to meet
Good
you.
to see you, Luke.
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science
No, it can only be found. That's not what he said. Why can't? Maybe he's nervous. Haram alaik. Maybe he's nervous.
is a little shaky because I think that your claim is really being framed to be morality and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing it?
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes, exactly. And also that science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's
That is
why we
true.
define.
See, that's a much better answer. That's so much. Just say that. That's so much better. The exam is the 12th of June, by the way. Oh, why are you saying you're cooked? You have time. You have time. Why are you saying you're cooked? You're good. Inshallah. May Allah grant you success on your exam.
Science is value free. But that has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value predicated act. And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay, I understand that. And
That's such a cop-out. Like, own your answer. Own your religious views. Just say it.
me, myself, I am a former young earth creationist fundamentalist.
Oh, yeah.
So I have experience in this. I used to run a TikTok channel directed about apologetics about the Bible, specifically in this type of facet with morality, evolution and such, and going back and forth with that. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about slavery, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in that, it teaches you how to take care of a slave. Rather than saying slavery's wrong, I think
No,
it
it
should
says
say
that in the story of Moses.
Where does it say in the story of Moses that slavery is wrong? Rami, where are you from? I live in Canada. I'm from Canada. Ethnically, I'm Palestinian. Always got to rep. Always got to represent. I'm Palestinian, alhamdulillah. Where does it say in the story of Moses that slavery is wrong? Because the same Israelites who were freed from slavery, God revealed to them laws around owning slaves. So if it was wrong, God wouldn't have done that. Or is it only wrong to enslave Jewish people? Which one?
It says slavery is incorrect. It says
Well,
it's immoral.
that's why Moses leads his people away from slavery.
But why does the Bible predicate and tell people exactly how to take care of a slave? Isn't
Well,
that immoral? Wouldn't you say that culturally we've evolved as a species, as he said earlier about empathy?
Yeah, I would say that the reason we evolved, so to speak, away from slavery was because the West was founded on Judeo-Christian morality and the presumption that every person was made in.
Rami, you remind me of Rumzi, but with better hair. That's mean to Rumzi. And although I'm mad at him right now, he's our brother. So I can't allow this disrespect in the chat, okay? I cannot allow this kind of disrespect in the chat. So I hate to do it to you, but shame. Shame. Everyone shame him. I hate to do it, man. Shame.
In the image of God.
Wouldn't you
And so
say that-
slavery itself became immoral, and that was established by Protestant Christians in the UK, who then convinced the UK government for 200 years to go to war on
And
slavery.
wouldn't you say that this is about the cultural evolution of humans in general rather than just Christianity?
No, I think it's the flowering of the ideas that were embedded in them.
They have to admit slavery was at one point moral since it was derived from evolutionary intuition back then. If you're a moral relativist, yes, absolutely. You would have to say that whatever moral stance existed at the time or relative to the time in society, yeah, it was moral. And then they can't disagree with Himmler, is what I'll say. They can't disagree with him and that party in Germany in the World War II. So you can't be a moral relativist without admitting that.
Biblical texts across long spans of time.
I feel like this is just humans editing based on the cultural evolution
What do you
of
mean
morality.
by just?
Just?
Yeah, these were just humans who fabricated parts of the Bible instead of God. This is exactly what Allah says in the Quran. Now, this is an atheist making the argument. He wouldn't say this. I'm saying this as a Muslim, obviously. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, woe to those who write the scripture with their own hand and say this is from Allah. Yeah, they're just humans who are lying about God.
Not just humans.
Well, humans.
Editing.
Why are you giving humans so much credit? Or is it because they're Israelites? They were Israelites. Is that why? I'm starting to see a theme.
Based on culture and history, right? We get better.
Well, they
and-
did do it based on culture and history, but
Yes.
culture and history have their foundations too. So
Well, yeah, but we're talking about slavery. So many people bolstered it based on the
Everyone-
Bible. Based on the
that's-
Bible, they
that's
looked at
much
it and
less
they
true.
justified it. In the United States, in the Deep South, they justified slavery
yeah, but
based
the main
on the
thrust,
Bible.
the main thrust of Protestant thought in particular was stringently
Yes,
against slavery,
which-
and it was about the only movement in the history
Yes.
of the human race that
Yes.
had an anti-slavery direction.
Which was driven by humans and their
Well, that's
understanding.
one.
I don't think this is a good conversation. I don't think this guy's doing a great job. With all due respect to him, I think he started off fairly strong, but I don't think it's going in the greatest direction.
Which evolves over time.
Let's pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
That scared me.
Well, it was great talking
Damn.
with you,
Nice
sir.
talking to you too.
Dr. Peterson?
Damn, he
Good to
sprinted.
see you, man.
Pleasure.
What's your name?
Brian. So the first thing
This is Brian. Okay, this is Brian.
I would like to say is I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to engage where there is one clear winner and one clear loser. Emotions are activated and it ultimately comes about ego. So I'm just saying I'm really trying to understand your position. And
The immediate de-escalation, I respect. I respect the de-escalation.
I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
And he's setting standards. Let's understand each other. I like that.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good.
Peterson liked that as well.
With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I
That is absolutely true.
would
Yes.
say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting. Because I would say, by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's
Okay.
a definition, right?
God is the unity upon which moral claims are placed. No. God is the arbiter of morality. He decides what is moral and he tells us. We hear and we obey. That is the correct definition.
Okay, if there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Skip Brian, he's a little too boring. Also could be a Mossad implant to save Jordan Peterson. That is a crazy, crazy accusation. Crazy accusation to throw on my man Brian. Relax, dude. Oh my God, that's so funny. I hope that's not a real claim because that's too much, man. Too much.
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary upward, self-sacrifice, so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
Muslims established the kingdom of heaven on earth as prophesied in 2 Daniel. For the record.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell.
Yes, that's a good way of thinking about it.
What is the purpose of heaven? Do you understand?
Well,
so here's the deal.
At
we
minimum,
can get
it's
into
the
an
opposite
infinite.
of endless suffering. How about
We
that?
can, okay, and so should we not try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth? And if we can achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth without God, avoiding it, if we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't.
Well, you can't do it without God because morality cannot be understood without God. So you wouldn't be able to decipher what is moral or immoral without God. Therefore, you need God to tell you what's moral and immoral and then go to heaven. So it doesn't really make sense.
Invented my initial definition because I said that by definition, God was the unified source of morality.
That is not what he said. That's what he should have said. He said something different, but now he's saying it, which is good.
And so if we engage in a moral exercise...
And when you're talking about morality, though, when you really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist, it really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God,
It's more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is...
Jordan Peterson has a right to defend himself. What do you mean by defend?
A moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit. If it's
going to come at your expense, would you still follow it?
Expense.
If God...
No! I'm cringing. I'm cringing inside. Define your expense. Anything that's of detriment to you, that's your expense. Expending things, resources, whatever you contain, whatever you possess, whatever you have, you're expending it. Whether it's $1 or it's your left arm.
Came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it. But even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell. Are you going to follow it?
Well, that was the question that was put to Job and to Christ, right?
Parker's loving this. You guys can't see it, but I can see it. Parker's loving this.
Because they were required... Hang on, I'm answering your question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So yes, they did.
Well, no, they didn't do it solely for their benefit. In the story of Ayub alayhi salam, he could have asked God to relieve him of his burden, but he felt too shy. He felt too shy to ask Allah. So then he sat there and suffered through this test because he was too shy to ask Allah to raise it from him, because Allah had blessed him with so much in this world. He's like, Allah gave me X amount of years of blessings, and he tests me for a little bit, and I'm going to be ungrateful, I'm going to be worried, I'm going to ask to get out. That was his mentality, alayhi salam. So, no, but again, Jordan Peterson is not really interacting with it, and also I'm a Muslim. I'm saying this from the Quran. They have messed up views with the prophets in the Bible.
Yes, they did.
Hang on. Let's define benefit.
Let's define benefit. Let's not define benefit. Let's not define the most basic word in the sentence. Please. I'm actually losing my mind.
If I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit?
Did he just ask that? Wait.
So
let's define. Hang on. Let's define benefit. Like if I did something for your sister.
Okay. That just sounded so weird to me.
Be to your benefit? Like how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time?
So
what do you mean by
when you're talking...
I thought he said, if I did something to your sister, would that be to your benefit? And that's why I lost it for a second. I thought that was crazy, but he didn't say that, thank God.
About whims, I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying.
I don't think whoever said Brian is doing a great job here, I don't think he is, bro. I don't think he's doing a great job here, brother.
When I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about...
Is Jordan Peterson a believer, atheist, or agnostic? Rami, so far as I know, he's not atheist. So he agreed to do this Jubilee episode as a Christian, 1 Christian versus 25 atheists. That was what the prompt or the title of the video was. That was what the production of this video is. They later changed it to Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists, 25 atheists, whatever it is. So I don't know. And I don't think he knows either, evidently.
about how men should be masculine and things of that nature. You and
Honestly, someone said give JP a dictionary so he can define terms himself. It would be great to just pull up a dictionary, like at least on your phone, Oxford Dictionary or Cambridge Dictionary. And then whenever he asks, what do you mean by this? You just pull up the definition. Oops.
I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men
I'm going to skip. Wow, this went on for a long time. Okay, it's Parker's time. It's Parker time.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess
How is that relevant to this claim?
you're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
What typical Christians?
yeah, typically when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in an
How
all-knowing.
about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He's a major influence on
That's not how, I don't think that's how Christians would define it.
all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
I won't even.
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition.
What? No, a circular definition requires that you use the same thing twice. Circular definition is, I think this is true because I said it's true. I think it's true because I said it's, that's circular. That's what a circle is.
What do you mean
How
when
is
you
it
say you
circular?
believe?
That you think that it's true. That's what he said.
Was that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right, so
I'm going to just look up believe definition. Accept something as true. That is the basic definition. To accept something as true.
if
What's
you
a
believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
If you believe in something, you stake your life on it. What? That's not always true. For something like God, okay, maybe, yeah. But Parker actually, I saw this clip before. Parker I think he gives a good example right after.
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an...
You know what's interesting? I thought of this before, but I didn't really entertain the idea much. But he studied psychology, so he knows human behavior and he understands human psychology and how the human psyche works. I think he's doing all of this to be intimidating. The way he's sitting forward and he's using his hands like this and he's scrunching his eyebrows and he's speaking like this is very intimidating. And also, by the way, I feel very powerful speaking like this. I feel like I control the world through my words, looking at you in that manner. I think he's doing it on purpose to put them off in some kind of way to win one over them, to make them too nervous. And that's why they start scrambling around when he shifts the goalpost 11 times.
unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
How would you define belief?
This is
Something
it. This is
say?
it.
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your
Don't be
life?
so sure.
Lie to save your life?
He thinks he's so cold. He's clip farming. He's aura farming. Jordan Peterson is aura farming in 2025.
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
No, can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in certain...
He's so good at not answering. This is a skill. He was trained by Israel. It makes sense. He was trained by Israel. That makes sense now. The way he fluffs around everything and he dodges the questions in a way where it's like, what, I don't even know what just happened. I know who else does that.
Circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them, would you lie to like the Nazis? If
I
they're
would have
asking?
done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation
you
to begin
lie?
with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals?
It's a hypothetical to you, but it was a reality for a lot of people. This did really happen to real people in real life. So maybe it's hypothetical to you, but it did actually happen.
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
What?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
He got stumped. Stumped. Someone's praying beside me, so I can't speak too loudly, but he just got stumped.
Look,
Did you eat
don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking
Yes,
if you
you
ate
are.
it.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical?
I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there,
But, Dr. Jordan Peterson, there are times when you do everything you can to avoid a situation, but the situation just comes knocking to your door anyways, because there are some things that are completely outside of your control. For example, let's say there's a manhunt for you, completely out of your control. Someone took a clip of you out of context, they made an AI video about you saying something crazy, and now the whole world wants you. Eventually, the whole world is going to get you. Unless God doesn't will that, obviously. But if God wills and he allows them, the whole world's going to get you eventually. And they're going to come to your doorstep. And what are you going to do? Nothing. There's nothing you could do to avoid that situation. That's just reality. And that's how life works. Because there are much stronger forces out there than you and your will and you trying to not be in a situation.
you've made so many
And this is also really dumb because I'm pretty sure he lost his medical license, if I'm not mistaken. But did he do everything he could to avoid losing the medical license? Because that happened to him anyways.
mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about. Like there could be a Jewish friend that you have and you want to protect them.
There were Muslims who did this, by the way. There were Muslims who did this during World War II. They sheltered Jews from Nazi Germany, including in Russia when the Germans invaded.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of
I think you should just give up and translate it to normal languages. Please stop. I don't know how to answer this.
questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position? Because it
Oh, Muhammad figured it out. He just won't answer the door. That's a good one. That's a good one. Because if you don't answer the door, then what are they going to do? All right. You don't invite them in. They can't come in.
you don't
did
like, are you like
clarify.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask you.
It's just a
did you-
basic
yeah,
where you
like, if you-
put Jews' lives at stake and not
Don't worry, Dr. Jordan Peterson. It's not real. It's not real. Don't worry. No one's really at stake here. It's just imaginary. I don't know if you know the difference.
Germany. That's just a basic
Obviously, you
And by the way, this was a reality for people. It was a reality for people. It actually happened. I don't know if he knows that or not.
would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question for some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Like, so you're
Why are
anti-fascist?
you asking that?
I was just asking, just clarifying. But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's
manner
not
you
what truth
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about
you're-
truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously, right? Logically, because that's
No.
already happened. Like that's in the past. You don't have a time travel device. We're bringing this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, you would lie to save people's lives. So your definition of truth isn't actually how we're typically using it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really like want to be associated with
I can
Christianity with that
imagine
respect.
that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could manage. But that would likely indicate that I had made all sorts of catastrophic errors on my way there.
Okay, so let's say you made numerous catastrophic mistakes on your way there, and now you're in that situation. In that situation, what do you do? You've already messed up. Now that you're in that situation, what do you do? I think that's what Parker should have said. But to be fair, he asked it every way possible, except for that one way, and JP still found a way to run around.
So you would lie to save someone's
Was I muted when I said that? No, I wasn't, right? I hope not.
life. So again, you do believe it to be true in that circumstance, even though you like lied in that scenario. So
Not
clearly that's not
without
what
the
you see to be true.
context that I put it in.
You were not willing to
I
die for it. You
said-
were not willing to let other people die for it. So that's not what you see to be true then, seemingly.
You're doing exactly what I said you were doing at the beginning of the conversation. You're generating an impossible, restricted, hypothetical, with no precursors to back me into a
How's
corner.
it possible? Is there something contradictory about it? Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay, what I appreciate about Parker is he ran out of time as opposed to he got voted out. He ended up running out of time. Maybe he just had less time. I don't know. Maybe it's a certain amount of time per prompt. But yeah, Rami out of curiosity. Wow, I can't read. Rami out of curiosity. Have you studied philosophy at a degree level? Because I think the reason Peterson always asks you the meaning of this is that, and that is a cause of deep philosophy makes people question reality. I've never studied it. And yeah, I understand that philosophy, there's even something such thing as the philosophy of words, the philosophy of language. Philosophy is the underlying basic concept of all things that exist. There's a philosophy of things that exist as well. So yeah, obviously you can dig words down deeper and deeper, but you can't do it infinitely, right? Like if I ask you to define a word and then you define it, and then I ask you to define that definition, then you define that, then I ask you to define that definition, you're gonna get to a point where you're gonna be like, this is as basic as I can make it, and I can't go deeper than this. The problem is he keeps digging, he keeps going deeper, he doesn't stop. When you get to rock bottom basic level language, he still asks, what do you mean by that? Muhammad Hijab asked him, do you believe in God? And his response was, what do you mean by do? What do you mean by you? What do you mean by believe? And what do you mean by God? This man asked, what do you mean by do? D-O. POV. You're debating Jordan Peterson. Well, I mean, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by mean? Wait, okay, well, what do you mean by God? What do you mean by Christian? What do you mean by believe? What do you mean I'm annoying? What do you mean by annoying? What do you mean by insufferable? What do you mean I missed my medication time? I hope you enjoyed that.
My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists.
Hey, Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
Danny, nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Danny.
Danny.
You're saying atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I could flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay. Do Catholics attend to Mary?
Yes.
Okay. So do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
Well, they might not put her in the highest
But
place.
you would put it that way.
No.
You just said it. Now you're taking it back
There's
now?
still a hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within the
There's something at the top.
All right, you can worship things
Mary
below.
is quite a ways up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's go over your definition of worship again.
Danny's starting to get a little pissed.
What's your definition of worship?
Attend to.
And Danny's I just noticed he's doing the same thing that JP is doing. You guys can't see it. Maybe I can quickly bloop. He's giving the same look that JP gives. So I think he's trying to alpha him. Danny's trying to alpha the alpha male himself, Jordan Peterson.
Attend to.
Prioritize.
Do Catholics
sacrifice for.
What do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No, I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't add that to my definition.
You understand.
I said there was a hierarchy as well.
You attend to
So you can attend to something trivially, or you can attend to it deeply.
Okay, now you're adding stuff to the definition. But your original definition.
I added the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you familiar?
Just didn't understand it.
Are you familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
He did a deep dive. He read JP's history.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay. You're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
How do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're
Oh, he is stumped. He is stumped.
a Christian.
Danny's facial expressions here are goated. I can't lie. He's kind of cooking here.
You say that.
And it's funny. It sucks because I actually agree with the prompt that everybody worships something even though they might not know it. I agree with the prompt. But Danny is making light work of Jordan Peterson. I have to say it.
I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a
'cause I
Christian
won't
or you're
talk
not.
to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression
private.
I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
Oh my God.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
Oh, man, rage quit. Man, rage quit. That's so funny. That is so funny. Man. Yeah, may Allah guide Danny. He's a very, 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 very smart guy. I appreciate Danny a lot. Shout out to Danny. May Allah guide Danny, because I think he's a very, very genuine guy. This was hilarious. And it's funny because the video was originally, someone mentioned this before in the comments. The video was originally titled Christian versus 25 Atheists. Then they changed it because of this moment and all the backlash to Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists. So I don't know why they're trying to make Danny look dumb, but we all know the reality. No one wanted to go up. You guys couldn't see it, but nobody wanted to go up. There's like one guy who ran and others like slowly walked.
Hi there.
Hi, nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Gerard.
Hello, Gerard.
Nice to meet you, sir. So you've said that worship is when you prioritize and sacrifice for something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a hierarchy in there.
Sure. So I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street, right?
Probably, yeah.
Presumably. Do I worship
I don't know.
my
I've
wife?
seen some pretty bad marriages.
Assuming a good marriage, are you saying I worship my wife?
I'm trying to define worship.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So prioritize and sacrifice. I do
the
those
higher
things.
it is in the hierarchy, the more what you're doing is akin to worship. But even in your trivial acts of attention, you're prioritizing and partaking in worship, even if you don't know it.
So I am
And it's partly, well, with regard to your
Okay, so worship is a spectrum, which means anything that you regard in any sense, you worship it to some degree. If you regard it very little, then you worship it a little. And if you regard it very highly, then you worship it a lot. It's a spectrum. Everything's a spectrum now. Okay, great.
Hi there.
It's very nice to meet you.
What's your name?
I'm Ian.
Hi, Ian.
This is the last one we're going to watch before we move on, because I saw some clips of this and I recognized this guy from TikTok. So I wanted to watch and discuss this.
Yes. So God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers. Like, is all of this in line with Christian ethics?
No.
So then God doesn't fit within Christian ethics.
Well, the biblical library is a continuing story, and everything written in it has to be contextualized by the entire text. There's 65,000 hyperlinks in the biblical text. And you can take pieces of it out of context and criticize them, and that's what you're doing. But that's a mistake, I think. It's an analytic mistake because you're putting the cart before the horse.
I really don't think so. I think
Yeah,
that
no,
if
you
we say that something is Christian ethics, then I think that all of the books essential to Christianity would fit with it, especially if it's like the main character. When we're talking
How
about
do you deal
God,
with the morality of war?
So
how do you think you should deal with the morality of war?
Sure. Because I feel like the morality, like I feel like Christian ethics, like this is kind of, I guess I just think it's like kind of an absurdity to say that God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, but sure, well, we can go on my ethics.
Okay, I'm going to talk about this in a second. I want to say on that last point, I thought about it a little bit more. The reason we're on earth and therefore can be punished and suffer any kind of ailments or negative experiences is because Shaitan deceived Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam in heaven, basically. And then they were sent down to earth. So if he could be speaking about it in a causal way, that I'm on earth because Shaitan deceived Adam alayhi salam, and we ended up on earth, and now that I'm on earth, I'm being tested with these things that could only happen on earth and wouldn't happen in heaven. So regardless of how you look at it, it's still a true statement technically, and he's not blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is beautiful, to be honest. But here, I think he said his name was Ian. He's talking about the numerous amounts of very vile verses from the Bible that talk about, like Numbers 31:18, where it says to off all the men and women who have slept with men, but save for yourself all the young girls. Literally, that's what it says. And when it says the word taf in Hebrew, it means children. And every time it's translated, except for one time, it's translated as family. Every other time it's translated as children or the little ones. So like very despicable verse. And he's pointing out these things. And now Jordan Peterson wants to say, well, you're taking it out of context. What's the context? What is the context? And he doesn't engage with the discussion at all. And it's pathetic.
That's totally fine.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing with
Well,
that
I just think
question?
that it's an absurdity to say that the Christian God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, that like the Christian
I
God
didn't
isn't
say
like
that.
Christian
I
ethical.
said that the specific statements that you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is false.
What is the context? What is the context to offing babies? What is the context there? Elaborate, please.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through
Thank
the
you.
example. Yeah, so, and I apologize. So let's go through the example. So in 1 Samuel 15:3, God says, go and
Slaughter. Oh, wait, let me pause. I don't want to get smacked by YouTube. It says to off men, all the men, the women, the children, the infants, the sheep, the cattle, the camels, the donkeys, and spare none. And then, according to the Bible, God got mad at Saul for sparing some of the livestock. He's like, I told you to off all the livestock, and you kept some. So, what's the justification?
slaughter the Amalekites, slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants. What's the justification for that? Is that in line
That's a
with
good
Christian
question.
ethics?
That's a good question. I don't really know what to do with the terrible, blood-soaked, saturated history of the human past.
He didn't ask about the blood-soaked history of human past. He asked why, according to you, God commanded that.
I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. I mean, what you try to do in your own life, as far as I can tell, is to conduct yourself in a manner that makes such things much more unlikely.
I totally agree.
We're all saddled with the problem of the catastrophes that got us here, aren't we?
Yeah, but this one was commanded by God. That's the problem.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what differentiates it from anything else, is that this one, it's God saying, go and do this atrocity.
Do you think that there's ever such a thing as a righteous war?
How is offing babies a righteous war? He really sounds like a Zionist right now, if we're being real. He really sounds like a Zionist. Am I the only one hearing this? Am I level here, or am I losing it?
I'm skeptical. I'm not sure. It would probably be situational.
Well, right, fair enough.
Yeah, but this one
people...
certainly wasn't a just war. The context for the Amalekite slaughter is that 400 years earlier, they fought one battle, which they lost, and God says, that's it, I'm going to wipe them off the face of the goddamn earth. And then
Language, please. I didn't know that. I did not know that. The justification was one war they fought, one battle, not war, one battle they fought 400 years earlier and lost. That's kind of crazy.
And 400 years later, he commands the Israelites to genocide their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's not a just war at all. And also, a genocide is not a war.
Well, a genocide can be a war, but...
Absolutely not.
Look,
the genociding of the Amalekites...
He said that because of Israel. He definitely said that because of Israel. He just said that a geno could be a war. So where else are we seeing that? Very typical. Very typical of Zionists.
Okay, it's the men, the women, and the infants. That's not a war. The infants aren't combatants.
Look, I already said that it's very difficult to look at the blood-soaked past and to know exactly what to do about it. The answer I gave to the gentleman who is sitting here before you is that it's necessary to read a text like the Bible at all of its levels of analysis simultaneously. And there's a directional morality that emerges across time that has its roots in the Old Testament, for example, with its restrictions against murder specifically, that makes itself manifest in the Christian texts as the insistence on voluntary self-sacrifice as the foundational belief. That's a profoundly anti-violence ethos.
Do you have
You don't refute one claim by bringing a verse that says the opposite. Because if verse number 1 says exactly what he's saying it says, meaning that, hey, verse 1 says something bad, and then verse 2 says something good, that doesn't mean verse 1 doesn't say something bad. That means that it has bad, it has good. Address the bad. It's like saying, hey, this guy is a psychopath, like, killer, and he offs innocent people. And then you say, well, he baked his grandma cookies once. So, like, how bad can he be? No, it doesn't work. Stop.
Belief in your theology.
Well, what do you think of that? Wait a sec. Now, redress what I just said.
So I'm about to address it, but I'm addressing it with a question. Do you think that God...
He's addressing it with a question, so he's not really addressing it. But I will accept this because he's talking to Jordan Peterson.
Is by his very essence perfect.
You'll have to provide more.
Sure, just like maximally great and all, like
I think
the great.
it's sure.
Yeah,
by
like
definition.
flawless. Yeah. So,
Okay,
so,
so
does a
wait a
flawless
sec,
thing
wait a
change?
sec.
Does a flawless thing reveal like more and better information over time, or would a flawless thing say, here's what's good, here is the absolute good thing to do at all circumstances in time?
Well, we know some of that.
In the chat for Islam, W Islam, because Allah in Islam doesn't change. The Christians have to believe that God was not a Trinity, did not reveal himself as a Trinity, and commanded very strict Mosaic law that had a bunch of terribly immoral things, and then later changed his mind and said he's all about love and he's coming down in human form to go basically kill himself, a'udhu billah, to forgive them for sin, instead of an animal sacrifice or whatever that they had before, or just forgiving them when they repented. And also, by the way, you can eat pork and drink alcohol all of a sudden. All of a sudden, you can party, have a good time. No problem. We don't believe that as Muslims, alhamdulillah.
Wait,
Tell
so
the truth. That's one.
That's totally fine, but presumably...
No. You don't get to skate over that. That's totally fine.
It's a straw man of my position. It's a straw man of the argument. So
In
the
what way?
argument is that God...
Wait a sec. You said find one maxim that's transcendent across situations.
I didn't say any of those words. I'm not sure what conversation you're a part of.
Don't be a smartass.
This is so funny, man. This is so funny. And I love this guy. I don't know why. He's just funny, man. He's so unironically funny.
I'm sorry.
Seriously. I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation, conduct yourself properly.
Jordan Peterson, you are the one misbehaving. You are misbehaving. Look at that. Does this look like the face of a man who's behaving himself? He's been acting very inappropriately. Shame. Shame on him.
Okay.
Rephrase your question so that, because I must have missed it. I tried to answer it.
So in my mind, I guess by my lights, a perfect being doesn't change. A perfect being, if they're maximally good, maximally moral...
Does our understanding of the perfect being change?
Our understanding might, but presumably what the perfect being is revealing...
Well, I agree. How do we distinguish between that, though, at the human level?
How do we distinguish between whether...
Between our transforming understanding of perfection and perfection itself.
Between our...
We can only... Yeah, well, we can only see through our own lenses.
Presumably a perfect being would be revealing all of these aspects all the time, especially if God's outside of time. I don't know how a God who's outside of time is revealing different things at different times. That just seems like incoherent to me.
I don't know why they're voting him off. Like, one guy put up his flag and then everyone else was like, oh yeah, I have free will. Let me put up my flag as well. Like, I think this is a good discussion. I think he should continue. I don't know why they let that one lady go on for so long. But they're kicking him off. Do they not like that it's contentious? Because you need to be contentious with this guy. I think you need to deal with him the way Danny did. Maybe a little bit nicer. Save a little more graciousness, for the beginning, and then maybe be a little more rude later on. But at the end of the day, I think Danny dealt with him the way he needs to be dealt with inevitably, because he doesn't actually answer anything.
Imagine something that's perfect.
Sure.
And complete.
Sure.
Okay, and it's trying to communicate with creatures who are anything but that.
Sure.
So, because humans are imperfect, God commanded them to go off babies. Is that what you're saying?
We're going to get it wrong.
Sure.
Okay, now wait a sec. Do you blame that on the interpreters or the phenomena itself?
What? Okay, maybe I'm stupid. But if God in the Bible says, and we don't believe this as Muslims, but if he said, go to the Amalekites and off the men, the women, the children, the infants, the sheep, the cattle, the camels, the donkeys. I don't think that needs to be interpreted. I think that's pretty clear. I think it's like, you say jump, I jump. You said jump, so I jumped, kind of thing.
So
like, for example, are you perfect in attending to your conscience?
Hold on. At the point in time when God is literally...
I love how he said, hold on, and then continued. Because so many people would listen to his question, think about it, get stumped, and then try and answer. But he's like, no, we're not going to move. We're going to address this damn issue.
The one who created us, he could have created us in a way where we would always be receptive to these principles, where we don't have to go across like a learning curve where, maybe we'll understand.
Not maintain free.
This is a good response to what he said, but it's not a good point outside of the context of this discussion. And the reason, in my opinion, is because I read a comment that said Shaitan inspired book has this effect. And I almost refer to Jordan Peterson as Shaitan, which the tongue speaks truths unintentionally sometimes. But yeah, Jordan Peterson was saying that God is perfect and he's communicating to imperfect human beings, and therefore human beings did atrocious things because the Bible says that. Is he saying that the people who wrote that in the Bible were wrong? Or is he saying that God revealing that was wrong? He's not really being clear. So now in response, Ian is saying that if God is maximally perfect, he could have created us in a way where, we would just perfectly understand everything. And therefore we wouldn't have that issue. And in response to what Jordan Peterson said, I think that's a fair response. But generally, no, that doesn't really add up, because God, at least in the Quran, is clear morally. And we have the Prophet, peace be upon him, to refer to. So these things are fairly clear, especially on the major things, like if you can off innocent people or not. That's clear cut. You can't do that. And there are many, many instances of that being said exactly word for word in the Quran and in the hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him.
Thousands of years in the future, maybe we'll do it. Oh, also, if you believe in an all-knowing God, then free will is impossible, because
Wait
if
a sec. Let's not go to that.
That is not true at all. I never understood this argument. I never understood this. And not because, I hope not because I'm dumb, but generally I don't think it makes sense. I think it's self-defeating. Usually the way they say this argument is self-defeating.
Because you threw free will into the mix.
Well, that was the answer to your question.
Yeah, and
you
I'm
said,
saying
why
that's
wouldn't God?
incoherent.
Well,
It's
1,000
contradictory.
years of deep thinking philosophers would disagree with you.
Yeah,
But have
and
it your way.
1,000 years of, or at least like the last 50 years of philosophers would disagree with you. These analytic philosophers, people like Graham Oppie make arguments about the incompatibility of omniscience and free will, that if God created this world, if he chose this world instead of that world, then he makes it causally inevitable every single action that you were going to make. If he made a world where we were just electrons in love, then none of this would have happened. But by making us in this world, knowing exactly what's going to happen in the future, it makes all of those events inevitable, which means that they're all causally determined, which means that we have no free will.
This is why I didn't know he was going to actually go into the full argument, but I'm glad he did, because now I get to talk about it. This is exactly why I think the argument itself is incoherent, because you're essentially saying, because God, one, knows what I'm going to do, I didn't choose to do it. But that's not true. God knowing what you're going to do doesn't mean that you're not the one doing it. You even said God knows what I am going to do, meaning you chose to do it. Secondly, and that's not all he said, what he said mainly was a long stream. Yeah, it's a long stream. Sorry if you don't like that, but it's a long stream. I haven't gone live for like a week or two, so it's needed. But what he said is that God created a world in which inevitably I would make X, Y, Z decision. I'm paraphrasing to make it simpler, but that's basically what he's saying. That moments in time only pass once, and you will decide to do based on your circumstances in that moment. But the key point is you're deciding to do it. You're still the one who's deciding to do it. So that is not any more indicative of a lack of free will as it is that things are predetermined to happen. All that proves is that things will only ever happen once, and that's that. I don't see what the argument is there. You would have to presuppose determinism in isolation without any free will, just determinism, pardon me, to say that we don't have free will, and that's essentially what this argument is saying. It just also throws God into the mix for some reason, but it's not an argument against God. God's role in this is that he created the universe and he knows what we're going to do. And I don't know why we're defining free will as your ability to choose in isolation of the circumstances. I don't understand how. Like, do I only have free will if I live in two different circumstances? Like, it doesn't really make sense in my opinion. Most secular philosophers are compatibilists. That's interesting. I didn't know that, but it makes the most sense. I mean, we are technically compatibilists as well.
If you believe in an all-good God, or an all-knowing God that made everything.
Well, have it your way.
Okay, cool. So then the free will theodicy fails.
Well, it fails for you. That doesn't mean you've disproved it. I mean,
Do you want to
tried
respond
to
to
make
the argument?
Yes, you tried to make a case for a causally deterministic universe. I don't think there's any evidence for that at all.
Do you think that God could have created a different universe than the one that he created?
I have no idea.
This is a very interesting question because it frames it like could God have created a different universe or whatever, which obviously God can do anything. But the question is, what is a thing? Not to be Jordan Peterson, but things are only things that are possible, right? That's such a stupid definition, but when you refer to a thing, you're referring to a possibility, a possible existence, right? God can't make a squared circle because it's inconceivable. It doesn't make sense. It's unintelligible. Even the proposition of a squared circle is just a contradiction. Therefore, it means nothing. It's like asking, can God rock, paper, scissors, ceiling? It's like, what does that even? It doesn't mean anything. So, what do you mean by things? Yeah, what do you mean by things? Anyways, moving on. Can God or could God have created a different universe? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decisions are always perfect. And if his decisions are perfect, then his decision to make the universe was perfect. And his decision to make it in the way that he made it was perfect. And therefore, if he made it in another way, it would have not been perfect. And therefore, it would not have been an action of God. Therefore, it's a contradiction to propose a universe any different to the universe that we live in. I think, I could be wrong. I'm not studied on this Islamically. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Islam. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. And I'm pretty dumb sometimes. So let's not take this as fact, please. But it's interesting discussion for sure.
Okay, so then there's going to be a double bind, right? So either he couldn't have done it, in which case he lacks a power, or he could have done it, in which case we don't have free will, because he chose this world instead of that world, making the events of this world instead of that world inevitable with his infallible knowledge.
I actually think it's amazing how every argument that tries to use the attributes of God to disprove God inevitably contradict themselves. This is the same thing as, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? Because God is all powerful. You're ascribing to you're ascribing to God the power of not being able to do something. That's self-contradictory, because you describe God as all powerful, then you're now trying to ascribe to God the power of not being able to do something, which is inherently a weakness. So you've contradicted yourself. The argument, the proposition doesn't make any sense. The question doesn't make any sense. Secondly, here, with what he said, if God created a different universe, if God is perfect, which he defined God as being maximally perfect in this example, if God is maximally perfect, then his decision to make the universe as he created it was maximally perfect, which means it couldn't have been another way. Self-defeating again, in my opinion.
Understand where you're headed.
Well, it just means that the free will defense fails. Like all this, like under
Like
your
I said,
view,
if you want to have it fail, no problem. I don't know why it's relevant to the issue we're
Do you
discussing.
acknowledge that under your view, free will doesn't exist?
No.
Oh, then do you want to respond to the argument?
You'll have to phrase it more clearly
okay.
so that someone like me can understand it.
Yeah, gotcha. So God already.
You guys can't see Parker, but he's so proud. Parker has such a sweet face. Like, he's just like, I don't mean this in any way, but he has like a cute face. Like, he just has such a sweet face. And if you guys saw him, then you'd know what I meant. But he looks like a proud dad right now. I don't know why, but he looks so proud. I love how Muslim Lantern destroys atheists that use philosophy in his videos. I would love to see that. I don't think I'm going to need to watch that after, inshallah. Send a video if you have one in mind.
He knows in advance everything that's going to happen, which means that by making this world instead of that world, everything is inevitable, which means that God's act of causing this world instead of that
Inevitable
world
doesn't mean determined.
It's causally inevitable if God chooses this world instead of that world.
Doesn't
Causally,
make it determined.
See, this is a good point. Inevitable does not mean determined. Good point.
Causally inevitable means determined.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely, yes, it does.
Well, have it your way.
No. Causally inevitable means that a certain set of conditions will lead to an inevitable conclusion. But that conclusion is not that you do an action. That conclusion is that you choose to do that action. That's the key difference. That under these circumstances, you choose to do that action. And this is what's so interesting. Allah only gave us this life to live to test us, to show us, to prove to us who's best indeed and who deserves heaven, who deserves to be punished. God already knows what we're going to do. Therefore, he could have spawned us on the day of judgment and said, well, if I gave you life, you would have done this, this, and that. But people would just say, no, you didn't even give me a chance. So God gave us this life to test us, to show who's good and who's bad. And then on the day of judgment, he says he will show us our own deeds. And then people, Allah mentions in the Quran, people on the day of judgment will say, send me back, I'll do better. But Allah says in the Quran, if they did go back, they'd go right back to the same exact lives they were living before. Nothing would have changed. So there's no injustice here.
Okay.
That's not the case.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return.
Okay. That was good so far. It's Maghrib. I have to go pray. So I'm going to put on the oh so great Salah break screen. If you guys didn't pray, go pray. The camera's in front of me now so I can look at you like Jordan Peterson. What do you mean by pray? What do you mean by Maghrib? Go pray if you haven't prayed. I'm going to go, inshallah. I'll be back in 5-ish, 10-ish minutes.